Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suisuiki. Coming up, PNG's opposition insists on removing Prime Minister James Marape. Also,
we have schools that are safe, but can they pass an inspection today? Probably not.
Chaos marks the start of the new school year in Guam, and
a number of its members recognise Taiwan, but as the numbers there are dwindling, that becomes increasingly more difficult.
An academic says she's not surprised at China's reaction at the Pacific Leaders Summit. The Papua New Guinea Parliament is sitting from today, and top of the agenda is again the plan by the opposition to try and remove the Prime Minister James Marape. A series of efforts by the opposition to bring a vote of no confidence so far this year have come to nothing, and Mr Marape says he has the numbers to avoid removal. Don Wiseman spoke with our PNG correspondent Scott Whitey.
It looks set that the opposition will bring about a vote of no confidence. They haven't really announced an alternative Prime Minister as yet, and that statement earlier regarding the Prime Minister's position still up for grabs still stands. The most significant move overnight has been the Health Minister, and he's a senior member of the Marape Rosso government. Comes just 24 hours before the session of Parliament, and he's expressed a lot of things, and including the state of the country in terms of law and order, the ability of police to control crime, and the institutionalized corruption that he's seeing in state agencies. So it's a big, significant move that the government has seen in the last few months.
I presume he's not blaming the current government for all the lawlessness and the corruption, because that's been there for time immemorial, hasn't it?
Yeah, he appears to be looking at a whole of government approach and a long-term perspective on the issues that he's mentioned. And there's a feeling that he joined the government because he thought that he'd be able to resolve those issues. Now, as health minister, he's also been very frustrated by the budget cuts to the health sector, the difficulties in getting the medicines in on time because of budget shortfalls that he's expressed time and time again in government. So it's all of that put together, I think, and he was against the discussions around the awarding of 600 million, the provision of 600 million from the Australian government for rugby league, because he felt that could have been put to better use elsewhere.
All right, so that's the situation with Dr. Lino Tom, but yes. Is there any movement the other way from the opposition into the government? The
most significant one in the last week or so has been the movement of Elias Kapawore, and members of the East New Britain, the members of the NGI bloc, moving to government and stating that they will remain firm with the Marape Rosso government. The Prime Minister's announced as of yesterday that he hopes and he's confident that he will have 80 members on the floor to ward off any attempt of a vote of no confidence.
So, once again, this issue dominating things, but what else can we expect this session to look at? There is, for them, this overriding thing as far as the people of Bougainville are concerned, of the ratification of the Bougainville referendum, which was meant to happen a year ago, hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, unfortunately, Don, I think for this session in Parliament, it will be dominated by the vote of no confidence and the power play. The ratification is being worked on with an independent mediator, and that will take some time before we can have a firm answer on where to go next with the ratification.
Delays in public school reopenings have caused confusion and chaos for Guam. The US territory has failed or delayed health inspections and sanitary permits over the years, and officials can't answer for sure why. Our Guam correspondent Naina Rao reports.
Chaos marked the start of the new school year in Guam, with 18 out of the 41 GDOE campuses, that stands for Guam Department of Education, failing to clear health inspections in time for August reopenings.
We have schools that are safe, but can they pass an inspection today? Probably not.
That's Chris Anderson, an administrator for Student Support Services, speaking at an emergency legislative session. Lawmakers debated reopening schools despite failed inspections to avoid disrupting the academic year. Senator and Legislative Speaker Therese Terlahi opposed the idea.
I don't understand why we would even accept that for our kids.
Terlahi argued bypassing violations would be absurd if they involved critical issues like rat infestations or leaking roofs.
It's why we came here in the first place.
These issues are part of a long history of problems at GDOE, broken facilities, safety hazards, and more. In 2007, the U.S. federal government cited GDOE for mismanaging grant funds. By 2009,
a marked lack of progress by the Guam DOE in addressing its fiscal management deficiencies.
As reported by the Pacific News Center. That same year,
Guam Fire Department Fire Chief Dave Pareto told senators that GFD inspected 36 schools since last year, and not one except for the new schools have fully functional fire alarm and sprinkler systems.
Maintenance issues persisted, compounded by teacher shortages. Fast forward to 2017, alumna Sarah Garcia was disappointed to find her alma mater, Simon Sanchez High School, in continued disrepair. She told KUAM News,
"Some classrooms, there were holes on the ceilings. Some of the students were sent to pick up resources or books, wet with mold. Am I going to a kind of third world country school?"
Things worsened after Typhoon Mawar damaged the aging campus last year, forcing students into double sessions at another high school. Guam's Office of Public Accountability still considers GDOE as a high-risk grantee. They told RNZ Pacific that this may be the case for a few more years due to late reporting and audit submissions with a lot of problems. Parent Letitia Santos, whose kids started school 2 weeks late, shared the challenges.
It's different. It takes a toll on the student, I guess, because of time change. Like, they're so used to starting in the morning, and then so they start in the afternoon now. So that's the difference, and then their sleeping habits have changed a lot.
Single parent Annalisa Sahagan struggles with her kids attending school online.
Who's going to watch them?
Sahagan works full-time and can't bring her kids to work, while her eldest starts middle school online due to delayed reopenings.
It's hard. If I don't work, I can't pay my bills.
In early August, the Education Board declared a state of emergency for GDOE. Guam Governor Lou Leon Guerrero held a special public address reiterating her lack of power to govern the department because of the Organic Act of Guam. The act is a federal law passed by U.S. Congress that made Guam a U.S. territory with its own government and gave the people U.S. citizenship. It's not a constitution, but it's like a constitution. The governor noted that before 1986, the Organic Act gave her office control over public schools, but amendments shifted that power to the legislature.
I cannot manage Department of Education's leadership, deploy its personnel, direct its finances, or correct its policy.
Right after that, she proposed legislation to grant her authority over the department until 2026. Senator and Education Oversight Committee Chair Chris Barnett criticized the governor's approach, stating she already has the authority to assist schools.
Unfortunately, she never used that authority. And in fact, this governor, lieutenant governor, campaigned on fixing the schools in 2018 and in 2022.
The governor argues that using resources from various agencies is just a temporary fix. But something else happened. After the governor assembled a school readiness opening team, or SORT, which essentially mobilized government agencies to help get public schools ready for inspection, over half of the campuses and facilities passed inspections or renewed their sanitary permits within weeks. Guam Education Board Vice Chair Angel Sablan thanked everyone involved, including public health, school staff, volunteers, and the community.
And all the different agencies from the government of Guam that have come forth and put personnel from their own agencies to be in these schools daily to assist in whatever it is that we need.
GDOE officials responded in laughter when asked how they were able to pass inspections and secure permits in just a few weeks after dragging out the process for years. A non-GDOE attendee said the difference was pressure, and officials did not further comment on that. When RNZ Pacific asked if GDOE needs continued pressure to keep inspections on track, Education Superintendent Eric Swanson said,
"No, it does not,"
but offered no details on how to prevent future delays from happening again. For parents like Miracle, whose autistic son is struggling with the disruption, the impact is clear.
He's going to have to reacclimate twice. Once going to this alternate school, and then again when he goes back to Price.
Price as an H.B. Price elementary school located in central Guam. It's pending inspection, so her son is in a double-session elementary school elsewhere.
It's a situation that I'm more nervous about. For him, it's the routine.
When asked if GDOE is offering any accommodations to parents right now, Deputy Superintendent of Curriculum and Instructional Improvement, Joe Sanchez, said the department cannot watch the kids for the parents.
Our approach has not been to be punitive, so we're not referring them to the attendance officers. At the same time, it is their responsibility to attend class.
He noted that the option to pick up physical copies of academic instructional materials is available for students.
That flexibility is definitely there. For the parents of special education students, again, we've offered that opportunity to transfer to schools that are on a daily basis.
While other families who've spoken to Sanchez said they'll stick with online classes until schools physically reopen. Miracle, juggling work and parenting, noted the irony of the situation.
I have to pay rent. The expectation for me to pay is at the first of every month. Is kind of similar to the expectation that school will start, or the expectation that
parents are notified of certain changes with plenty of time to spare.
So what if I go up to my landlord and be like, well, I changed my husband, so my payment will be a month late. And by the way, I changed my bank too, so the system's different. So instead of paying you the way you want to pay, you might have to wait a little bit longer. I would probably get kicked out.
Miracle shared a parent's vow. They'll do whatever it takes to meet deadlines for their kids' education. No excuses.
But then when the other party changes their mind and changes their dates and it affects our schedules and our lives, we have to be able to just be, that's cool, okay. Sure, I'll go to the orientation you just announced yesterday.
The governor's office maintains that the Organic Act limits her control over GDOE.
Last week's Pacific Islands Forum summit ended dramatically when China demanded the communique be changed to eliminate a reference to Taiwan. The document had made a reference to the forum, reaffirming its relations to Taiwan, which has been a development partner since 1992. But the Chinese ambassador to the Pacific, Xian Bo, was furious, and the document was rewritten. Don Wiseman asked Massey University lecturer in security studies, Dr. Anna Poles, what she made of all of this.
Well, I think for a start, it isn't actually surprising the way in which China, through its special envoy, Qianbo, reacted to the inclusion of Section 66, which reaffirms the 1992 agreement between the Pacific Islands Forum and Taiwan as a development partner, essentially. So I don't think it's particularly surprising that China did react that way to the inclusion of it in the communique, given their own sensitivities. However, it does raise serious questions about the level of influence that external actors have on the Pacific Islands Forum.
The pressure on the forum over Taiwan goes back a long way. I can remember going
Indeed.
to forums 20 years ago, and the Taiwanese meeting would always be held off-site and a significant way off-site. It's just remarkable that the forum itself would buckle so easily.
Look, I certainly do agree. I think that this raises some very serious concerns about the way in which an external partner such as China is able to really seek to disrupt the status quo. And by that, I'm referring to Taiwan's relationship with the Pacific Island Forum, because it does effectively sit within the regional architecture as a consequence of the 1992 agreement. It also reflects the way in which China is seeking to utilize forum processes in order to squeeze Taiwan even further. Taiwan now has 3 allies remaining remaining in the Pacific. That's Palau, Tuvalu, and the Marshall Islands. And that has significant consequences going forward. For a period of time, the Pacific Islands Forum has been able to keep China at bay when it has sought to push the forum to adopt a one China policy, or in Beijing's term, a one China principle. And the forum has been able to push back on the basis that it has a number of its members recognize Taiwan, but as the numbers there are dwindling, that becomes increasingly more difficult. Now, of course, Solomon Islands has been key to all of this because the Prime Minister Manele raised the issue of Taiwan being a development partner because of Taiwan being a non-sovereign country. And this really speaks to concerns, key flashpoints that we can see down the track, one of which obviously is the fact that Solomon Islands will be hosting the Pacific Islands Forum next year, which raises questions around Taiwan and the ability of Taiwan to participate. And Prime Minister Manele did not answer that question when asked at the press conference last week in Tonga. But it also raises questions around, as part of the review of the regional architecture, there is a tiered approach that will be adopted. Tier 1 are the strategic partners, so those countries that partner with the forum, and Tier 2, which refers to the broader range of entities. So the question here is where does Taiwan fit between Tier 1 and Tier 2? And those questions will certainly need to be answered.
One of the odd things is the amount of aid that has come from Taiwan for the Pacific, and particularly for countries like Nauru over the years, millions and millions of dollars that rescued that country before it discovered the value of having detention camps on the island and got a heap of money from Australia, but they needed Taiwan to pay for everything. It's just astounding that now these countries can blithely forget about that. And the most zealous of all of the new friends is, it would seem, Kiribati.
Indeed, across social media has certainly been a topic of conversation about the way in which Taiwan, so, as you say, so recently a partner to Kiribati, to Solomon Islands, for instance, has been effectively being sidelined in these attempts to really strip Taiwan of its status in the region. And it's worth noting too that at the forum last week in Solomon Islands, Taiwan and the forum signed another agreement with additional funds going from Taiwan going to the Pacific Islands Forum. And so Taiwan is a development partner in the region and has been for a long period of time. So these efforts to strip Taiwan of its status and to effectively disrupt and reshape the status quo within the regional architecture are deeply concerning. And the Pacific Islands Forum certainly need to really invest in ways to better manage these types of crises going forward, whether that be through establishing some forms of guardrails, for instance, or even as part of the proposed Ocean of Peace Declaration. But there really do need to be some serious discussions about how to better manage this, because the dangers is that it could actually reinforce the divisions felt between the North Pacific and the rest of the Pacific. Solomon Islands, as I said, is hosting the forum meeting next year, but then 2026, Palau will be hosting the forum meeting. So we certainly do not want to see those splits that led to the Micronesian members seeking to withdraw from the forum re-emerging again as a consequence of these geopolitical plays.
What do you think will happen at this point? I mean, what are they saying, for instance, in Canberra or Washington about what happened the other day?
The perspective obviously is that China has effectively gotten its way by having the Section 66 removed from the communique. Secretariat itself has stated that it was an error, that version of the communique went up online, that it was not the agreed communique. There's still a lack of transparency around the processes, the process by which this actually took place.
It is actually odd that that reference was there. Taiwan has been an associate since 1992, but in various communiques, I can't remember any reference to Taiwan before, but someone somewhere thought it was a good idea to put it in there.
Exactly. And so it isn't clear in my conversations with people in the region. it certainly does seem that was an error, possibly coming out of conversations that were had at the leaders' retreat, perhaps, and then that was and the decision was made to insert that. But certainly, I can't imagine that there would have been consensus across all leaders to have that inserted into the communique, given Solomon Islands and Kiribati have both been fairly, and Solomon Islands particularly has been fairly strong on Taiwan's position within the regional architecture. So it is surprising. I do think it's worth noting that the 92 agreement was in the 1992 Forum Communique, which was actually held in Solomon Islands. So there is a degree of synchronicity here. But I think also there are concerns around the way in which the forum is sufficiently robust and able to withstand these types of pressures that we've seen over the past few days from China. And obviously there will be a great deal of concern in Canberra and Wellington about this. But I would say, though, for Pacific countries, and you would know this very well, Don, there have been long-standing concerns about the level of influence that a range of actors have had over the forum agenda, including Australia and New Zealand. So this isn't necessarily new, but it is certainly no less concerning, particularly when we see, footage of Special Envoy Tianbo having a conversation with Cook Islands Prime Minister Mark Brown, who assures him the communique will be corrected. So again, significant concern about the degree of overreach and influence and access that China has into the forum processes.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā, sui fua.